April 11th, 1692. The harbor of Solitude. As the submersible rose up through the water, the crew all peered through the porthole to view the gradual change in illumination. From the abyssal blackness of the deep to the dark azure of the midwater, then finally up through the turquoise and magenta shallows, lit by the clouds of glowing ethereal energy swirling above us within the cyclopean cavern that stretched beyond sight. Dark shapes cruised by our craft as we neared the surface, some moving slowly and gracefully, while others turned and wheeled after schools of fish. We had encountered some of these gigantic sea creatures before, but some of the new recruits were not prepared for the sight and needed assurances that they would be safe when exiting the submersible. I am not accustomed to offering false words of comfort, but it was clear that the landing would require precise work by the crew, and having soldiers panicking while disembarking could be disastrous. As we broke through the surface, little was visible through the portholes while the craft bobbed in the waves. So Captain Hawkins ordered one of the men to open the top hatch and get our bearings so we could find safe harbor. Unfortunately, the crewman was not familiar with the dangers above the water. As he shouted down from the top of the exit ladder about seeing ancient ruins on the shore, his words were cut short and he was dragged upwards and out of the craft. There were horrible screams, and then an awful rending sound that ended his cries and showered the men below with gore. The next group of crewmen were better prepared and were armed as they went on the top deck, firing muskets at and killing one of the long-necked beasts that rose out of the water to capture another meal. No other creatures came forth after the first attack, and we were finally able to get a clear view of the shoreline to find a suitable landing site. The shoreline of the Shadow Sea was as inhospitable as I had remembered, with a labyrinth of jagged rocks on the shore and reefs protecting almost all of the inlets. The wind shifted there in cycles, creating varying tides and breaking waves that made landing fiendishly difficult. After a full day of searching, we finally came to discover a large, crescent-shaped bay that blocked the waves and allowed for a relatively easy passage near shore. We passed several wrecked ships, some similar to our submersible, while others were clearly surface vessels with rotting masts jutting from the roiling waves. These ships were of a design that resembled Phoenician craft, if my eyes did not deceive me, but larger and with 2 additional masts. How they could have appeared here, I could not fathom. All thoughts of the wrecks disappeared as we cruised into the bay and finally viewed a magnificent port city rising from the ocean mists and glowing ethereal clouds shrouding the coast. The city stood still and mysterious, like a specter of ancient glory, beckoning us to dock upon its stone quays and traverse its tiled streets between towering structures of stone and gold. The ruins have an air of antiquity unlike any that I have examined, with ziggurat pyramids of intricately carved stone, similar to those in the Aztlan city of Calactol, but with friezes and murals of a much more disturbing and sinister nature. How to interpret the oddly angled architecture, the murals of tentacled creatures interacting with oddly featured men, and the detailed carvings of machinery that baffle our most esteemed scholars and professors, is something that I ponder each night spent in this accursed land. Many of the temples within the ruined city contain tiled passages and chambers leading ever deeper into the Stygian depths of the earth. These dungeons have only been partially explored, and some have contained magnificent golden treasures and powerful artifacts utilizing a unique form of ether energy. Many of the newly recruited soldiers have refused to go deeper into the tunnels, however, claiming to have encountered diabolical serpents and infernal demons with an insatiable bloodlust. Battles with these demons have resulted in the capture of a number of our troops, the horrific enemy carrying the poor souls into the darkness to perform unspeakable rites that caused screams to echo throughout the corridors. Some of our scholars have whispered furtively of ancient forms of magic and the scaly naga of legend, terrifying the new recruits to the point that they require the heavy boot and keen blade of Captain Hawkins to explore the dark passages below the temples. We've now made our main camp amid gigantic step pyramids, marveling at the sheer scale of the construction and unnerved by many of the carvings depicting unnatural creatures and demons of many sorts. This is a place that we cannot remain for much longer. One of the patrols returned to camp shaken after venturing out to the edge of the city's river to find a lost comrade. They reported seeing a dark shape larger than our submersible cruising underwater in the deep riverway, and the only remnant of their comrade, a solitary boot on the river's edge. The patrol fled in panic from the river, and when they returned, Captain Hawkins threatened them with death for their cowardice, knowing full well what foe lurked below the surface from his previous adventures in the Underlands. Since that time, we have survived a number of battles with wild creatures within and around the port city, and thwarted an advance from the Dark Mariners, crustacean-like beings of the deep ocean that plagued our first expedition and subsequent excursions into the depths of the underground sea. These horrific creatures flopped on shore atop tentacled limbs or levitated using arcane devices that channeled the ethereal energy of glowing crystals. We were able to repel their assault, though many men fell to the burning hellfire fired from their weapons, or were torn to pieces by massive claws.